guys, how's it going? Today we're back with another fan video. This is going to be a little different than previous videos. I'm going to make this more of a how-to video. I've had some requests from several people online to do videos detailing just about every step that I take in going through an old fan. So I figured we'd do a couple different versions of that. Start with the box fan here because these are simple. And then I'll also make one that applies for real antique like table fans and stuff like that. But anyways, we're going to be talking about this here first gen Lakewood, or is it's rebadged Barclay? I don't know. It's an unusual brand, as you can kind of see. Bear with me here. Right there. So, however you say that. I've never seen this rebadge before, but I guess there's a first time for everything. But like I said, this is a first generation Lakewood made fan. You can tell because of the big squared off blades like that. I'm assuming this is a product of the late 70s, early 80s. I'm not super well versed in Lakewood history, but just based on when similar fans were made and like that plug, which was non-polarized. The plug looks like something from like the 60s almost, but yeah, I think that these motors have dates on them, so we'll probably find one. But yeah, I picked this up at the Zagre Farm Museum Engine Show Flea Market. I was originally going to buy it for my buddy Rob, but then he decided he didn't want it, so I ended up picking it up anyways. And I think what I'm going to end up doing, honestly, is I think I'm going to end up cleaning this up and then flipping it. Because as neat as these are, I've been shifting away from plastic fans in my collection. So there's a good chance this one will end up sold. However, I do not have a first gen Lakewood, so there is also a chance that I hang on to this. We'll see how it cleans up and if it ends up growing on me. As of right now, the plan is to sell it, but you guys know me, and I know me, and you know, I sometimes end up getting attached to things as I work on them and whatnot. But neat thing about this particular fan is it's got the thermostat, which is kind of neat. The other reason I would end up keeping this would be because there's a chance I might be getting the second gen version of this to go with, which would be kind of neat, but I don't know, space is getting tight, so we'll see. But yeah, it's got the thermostat. That's also kind of unusual. Never seen one like that before, and as you can tell, it's extremely filthy, which is going to be the point of today. But it does run, and it runs pretty decently. The guy that had it actually didn't really want to let go of it, but a couple extra bucks changed his mind. So here we go on high. Medium. Low. Thermostat does work, as you can see. Does not move very much air as of now because it's so dirty. But it does run, so that's a good first step. Definitely needs a good clean and service though. I don't know if you guys can tell just how dirty this is, but let's see if the camera will focus on the grill there and whatnot. It's pretty nasty. So anyways, without further ado, I think what I'm going to do is a combination of both time-lapse and just talking in this video, because there's certain things that I'm sure you guys don't want to see every last little detail of, but we'll try and make this a fairly detailed explanation. So I guess we'll start off with the disassembly, and then we'll get into some of the servicing. Alright, so pretty much with any fan, the first step here is going to be disassembly. So with these box fans, that requires taking off the front and rear grills. Of course the boiler kicks on right as I'm trying to talk here, but requires taking off the front and rear grills, pulling the blades off the motor, and then we'll pop the motor out and take it apart too. It looks like these grills are in pretty decent shape. I don't think there's any broken slats. I think all the damage is stuff like this where it's on the edge here, which makes sense because it's a really thin plastic edge. And it's probably 50-something years old and a little brittle. That's pretty dirty. I don't know if the camera's going to pick up on how much stuff is actually accumulated there, but that's a That's a fair bit of dirt. No wonder it moved no air. I'll put that down out of the way there. Bearings actually aren't too bad. It's kind of nice. Keep this little chunk of plastic because we can glue that back in. Flip this around. Let's get to the back screws here. Alright, all the screws are removed. Gotta be careful because the cord goes through the rear grille. However, on this one, I think, because the plug is so thin, that we'll be able to get the plug through the grille without too much trouble. Oh yeah, slides right through. So that's pretty nice. Again, that one's pretty dirty. Put that down to the side. Now, most box fans, oh geez, that looks pretty rusty. Hopefully this isn't too stuck. Most box fans like this, these plastic bladed ones, the blades are just pressed on to the motor shaft. I'm going to scoot you guys a little closer here. So it's just a matter of pulling it off. So I usually start by getting my hands under the hub here and my arms against the cabinet and pulling up as hard as you can, maybe a little wiggling back and forth. And this is good because when it eventually pops off, it comes flying up at your face at 90 miles an hour. So just be careful. You also want to rotate if it's stuck like this. Oh, there we go. You can see there's a clip there, so it's kind of spring-loaded. But yeah, be careful. The other option is you take it, you flip it like this, and you push down, which is probably safer. But I find it, I don't know, I do it the other way, and I risk hitting myself in the face because I'm an idiot. But you can do it either way. This is probably the safer way to do. I'd rather hit myself with the blade than bash the blade into the table, I guess is the only thing there. And yeah, once again, absolutely filthy. I don't know if you guys can see that, but we're left with our, what I think is a Macmillan motor. So, it's neat, it's one of the square statered ones, which I've heard are the better ones, but yeah, what we're going to do now is carefully pop these wire covers off, because when we remove the motor, we're going to need to slacken the wire. These just kind of pop off one side like that, which I guess you guys can't even really see that. I'll do the bottom one too. Basically kind of just pull out on them and pop them over the thing because they've got little tabs. So, got those out of the way there. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and grab a nut driver for this motor and we'll get it popped out in a second here too. Yeah. Alright, we got an 11/32 nut driver. And there are 4 nuts on the back here. Let's go ahead and unthread them. Just make sure, obviously, you keep your hand on here when you go to remove this, because you don't want to drop the motor out of the thing. And then these will kind of scoot out of here, maybe. There we go. And you can see just how dirty that is too. Because you can clearly see what parts were protected by those rails there and what parts were not. But there we go, motor's freed. What I like to do is lay the cabinet down like this since the switch is still installed, and set the motor on the table just like that. Alright, this is a really important little step here. As you can see, this motor shaft is covered in rust and crap and stuff. That's going to make this really hard to slide through this bearing. And you don't want to jam all that stuff into the bearing or have the bearing get caught up on it and break stuff. So what I've done is I've set the motor here quick, grabbed some Scotch-Brite. I prefer this over sandpaper, it's a little less destructive. And what I like to do is I just turn the motor on and take this and just clean up quick. Just be careful, you don't want to get your finger caught in anything. Yeah, I'm basically just pinching the shaft between my fingers and running it up and down. Just don't want to stay in one place for too terribly long. Again, Scotch-Brite's a fair bit more forgiving than sandpaper. It's definitely smoothing stuff up pretty good. Yeah, aside from that one spot right there, this looks pretty good. Just gonna hit that by hand really quick. If you are going to use sandpaper, make sure to use like really fine grit sandpaper, like 400 to 1000 grit, if not 1500 even. You do not want to mar the shaft up with really aggressive sandpaper. Take that, just wipe that off. And yeah, that cleaned up pretty good. You can rub your fingernail over that and not catch it, so I think that's probably pretty good there. And go ahead and unplug that. And flip this over, just be careful of the wires. And we're going to use the same nut driver and take the 4 bolts out the back here. Cool. Now this should come apart fairly easily. In case it doesn't, hold the stator, take the screwdriver and you tap on the shaft. That will pop the rear casing off, kind of like this. Feed the wire through as we go here. Carefully remove your stator. And then we got our rotor and front bearing here. And then that should slide right off because we're pulling the shaft. So there we go. Motor's all taken apart. I guess let's get into how to service a motor. One neat little thing here, this might be a date code. I'm going to assume that it is. It says 77 here. M77, so that's probably a month, and then year of 77. I don't know what month M would be for them, but yeah, I'm going to call it a 1977, unless I learn otherwise in the production of this video. Alright, so we got our motor all blown apart here. Really only a couple parts to a motor. You got the front and rear shells, you got the stator, which has all the windings for the different speeds. Granted, this is for a shaded pole motor. And you have the rotor. One thing to note that these like to do, these are little spacer washers, also known as fiber washers. Make sure that you grab these because they like to stick on the end bells like that and you don't want to lose them. Normally I replace these, but these look like they're plastic and seem okay, so I'm going to leave them. If they're actually fiber washers, then just replace them even if they look good, because the fiber ones tend to just crumble with time. But yeah, that's pretty much the main thing there. We're going to do a couple things to this motor. First off, we're going to start by cleaning it. I usually use a old paintbrush, just really gently across the windings here, try and brush off any of the dust that we possibly can. Compressed air works pretty well too, just be careful with it. But usually the brush works pretty well. Just gotta watch with these two. They've got all these windings that are kind of exposed here and just tied together. You don't want to break any of those connections. Try not to snag any loose ones like that either. Usually with the stator, it's the side that's to the back of the motor, that's the dirty side, because all the air will be rushing through this way. But yeah, go ahead and clean this up here. Some of these areas is really packed in dirt. Try and do our absolute best to get all of that out of there, because I am going to hit this with a quick coat of varnish, just because. There, that looks pretty good. Do the same thing for the inside of the motor shells. Just grab a rag and you can wipe out all the dirt and crap and oil and whatnot that's in here. It doesn't have to be perfect, nobody's going to see it, but the less loose dirt and shit that's in this, the better. One other thing we can look at is just the bearing surfaces here. You can see, maybe. It's all shiny, it's got some lines in it, so this motor's got some hours on it. Also may have just been low on lubrication, so we're definitely going to make sure. You should oil a motor anyways, but we're definitely going to make sure that we oil this one particularly well. Take a little bit of the Scotch-Brite and just clean this up, make sure there's no ridges or anything. Sometimes they'll even put it in the drill and spin it and do this, but just be careful with that. You don't want it to go flying out. Did have that happen once. It completely ruined the shaft. It was not a good day. Again, make sure that the grit that you're using on like a shaft here is really fine. Scotch-Brite has grits too. This one it was probably one of the slightly more aggressive ones, but it's so worn down that there's not much left to it. That's why I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, you can see that cleaned up pretty nice there. And then we'll get to varnishing in a second. We're going to put oil in it first, let it soak in while we do the varnish. And I use Zoom Spout personally. Some guys think this is a little bit thin. Some people use 3-in-1. If you're going to use 3-in-1, make sure it's the blue can or the can with the blue accents for fan motors and stuff. They make one with red and black and whatnot, I think, but those aren't correct. My buddy Rob uses Royal Purple, which is probably the best thing you can get, but it's expensive. I like Zoom Spout because it's got the spout on it. There are oil ports on some of these motors. As you can see, they're full of crap actually, so we'll clean those out in a minute. Since you got it apart, you can see the oil wicking material that's down in there. Go ahead and soak that up. Make sure there's a good amount of that in there too. I know a lot of these 70s fan companies cheaped out and used that basically oil impregnated sawdust stuff, and it just kind of deteriorates and falls apart and disappears. I don't even really like reusing that. I replace the entire wick if that's the case. But this doesn't really look like that. This looks like it's something of a real wick. So we're going to try soaking it and see how it does. But yeah, I have other videos on the oil wick conversion if we're working on like a 70s table fan. That is a must do. But yeah, basically I just put some in the in and around the bearing here, let that soak in for a little while. Do it to the other side here. Don't have to go overboard. Just make sure it's wet and it looks wet and stays wet. And that will slowly start seeping in, especially if it's really old and dried out wick like this. It might take a minute, which is part of the reason we're going to do this first before the varnish. So it has a couple minutes while the varnish is drying to set in. So we'll start with that for now, and let me get ready for some varnishing. Alright, so normally I do this differently, but because it's about 15 degrees outside right now, we're going to do it inside. If you do this inside, make sure you do it in a very well ventilated area. This stuff kind of stinks and it's probably not too great for you. I have a really powerful exhaust fan in the window right now. It's moving some air through this basement. Normally I go out to my garage and do this. What you want to do is get yourself a can of spray-on EL600 clear. Don't use the red stuff, get the clear stuff. I know it's a little harder to get. I want to say that it's either Granger or McMaster Carr has this. I think it's Granger. It's not too terribly expensive. You get a lot out of one can. Pardon the noise of the exhaust fan vibrating over here. But yeah, basically like we did, we cleaned up the windings. You want to prop it up on something and block off the rest of the fan best you can. And this is just good for motor health. It helps extend it. It puts an extra layer of insulation on these, can seal up any loose windings that cause buzzing and stuff like that. And I think it's generally a good practice. You just want to make sure it's not too terribly cold outside so it can actually set. This thing isn't too bad. I'm not going to put a super heavy coat on. Some motors I'll absolutely soak. But yeah, it's basically like spray painting. And you take this and you just spray a little bit on each coil pack. Make sure to hit the sides on these since they're so exposed. You basically want to make sure that they look like they've been saturated pretty well. And we'll give that a little bit of time to set up there, probably 10-15 minutes. I'll flip it over and then do the other side quick. And I think for this fan we're only going to do one coat. Sometimes I'll do multiple. But it depends on the fan. This thing, like I said, probably doesn't even really need it, but just for, you know, good practice and showing you guys what I do, I figured I'd show you. So that's how you revarnish a motor, and I'm going to wait a little bit and then hit the other side, and then we can begin reassembly of the motor. Alright, so the varnish is dried. I've let these oil wicks kind of dry out a little, really just absorb the oil a couple times now, and I've added some more oil a couple times. This front one has been particularly dry because it just keeps soaking in more oil, but I think we're going to call it good there. The rear one seems pretty well saturated at this point. Try not to drop the windings directly on the motor case like that. But anyways, time for reassembly. So the key with this is you got to make sure you get the screw holes lined up, front and back. The stator just kind of presses in there a little bit. This is a big one that people don't always think to do. Put a little oil on the shaft first. It'll help give this a little lubrication before, you know, like when you first start running it. See, that's already spinning pretty nice. Same deal here. Take this and put a little bit of oil on the shaft. I do it all the way down. Of course, when it's sitting upright like this, gravity will take it down. With the front shell in particular, you got to think about where the oil port is in relation to both the rear and what's going to be at the top of the fan. It looks like, yep, it's going to go that way. I like to make them line up front and back just for ease of oiling and OCD. We can go ahead and put the screws back in. The key with the screws is when you go to tighten them, you want to tighten them in a cross pattern. I'm not sure I got this in the right way. I think I do. Yep. Okay. Kind of like you tighten the lug bolts on a car wheel, or head bolts on an engine or something. You'll see what I mean here in a second. I'm just going to get these threaded on, and we'll snug this up a little. Not completely sending it fully tight, but just snugging it up a little bit. Do a turn in a bit on that one. So we're going in an X pattern like this. This will help evenly torque down the case of the motor. That way you're not binding up the bearings as bad. We're still going to realign them anyways, but this helps. Is it 100% necessary? Probably not, but I think it's good practice. Once that is done, you can see this is really stiff now. At least it turns, but it's pretty stiff. This is a big one. This is one I didn't learn for far too long when I first started collecting fans, and a lot of fans got junked because of this. These bearings are not quite aligned. This is really stiff. You align them by tapping on the shaft. I do a couple in every direction pretty much, so we're going to just go opposite directions. So that's the minimum, side, top, and bottom. I'll even go as far as a little diagonals, one or two in and out. And you can see there's very little in and out play, which is good for a box fan motor. You have an oscillating table fan, you want a little bit more play for the oscillators to move around and whatnot, or the oscillating mechanism to move the shaft around a little bit. But there you go. That's definitely better. If it's still being problematic, you can get slightly more dramatic and forceful there. That actually helped. And we're going to call that good enough for now. It will also need to run a little bit to fully set in. That might actually be oil wicking material that's worked its way up the fill port there. I think that's what that is. But yes, that's how you reassemble the motor, and most importantly, realign the bearings. You can already see that spinning nice and free, so that's good. So at this point, we've done most of the mechanical servicing. I think at this point it's mostly just going to be cleaning up and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some rags and some cleaner, and we can start wiping this down. Alright, so obviously everybody's going to have their own cleaning procedure. Mine has always been go to the Closet and Steel Bombs multi-surface cleaner, which happens to be this Miss Myers stuff that she gets, and a microfiber cloth. Paper towels work too. I think the microfiber cloth works a little bit better. And that usually takes off most stuff. The only other stuff that I use on occasion is WD-40 is a good degreaser. If you got some really stuck on grease, or if you're doing a table fan, it's got a gearbox, you need to clean out some of the grease in there, that can work well for that. And sometimes I'll use one of those Mr. Clean Magic Eraser sponge things. But usually, if we soak this up pretty good, you can take this and pretty much clean most of the dirt and grime that you're going to have on a fan like this off. The reason I really like these microfiber cloths as opposed to paper towels is that paper towels tend to shred really easily, especially on stamped things like this motor housing. I would have shredded multiple paper towels just going over these vents like this, whereas the microfiber cloth just kind of takes it. But yeah, I usually just kind of go around, use your finger, some force there. I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory, but figure we're doing a tutorial video, so might as well go over everything. It looks like there's some rust on this, so this isn't going to be completely perfect, but we'll get it about as good as we can. Interrupt the time lapse here quick. Motor's all cleaned. Looks a million times better. One thing to note is that I'm not spraying anything directly on the motor or at the motor. I don't like putting cleaning products on motors. I don't even really like doing like contact cleaner or stuff like that near these. Don't want to mess with the varnish or anything. I'm going to take Mr. Motor here, put him out of the way. For the rest of the fan, I like spraying cleaner directly on. I think it works better if you know, take this and let it soak on that dust a little bit. But yeah, next up I'm going to start cleaning out this cabinet a little bit. Then we'll mount the motor back in the cabinet, do the blade, and then lastly we'll get to the grills. Here's something that most people forget about. It makes a big difference. Power cords. These are often quite dirty. You'll find that even if they don't look that dirty, if you run them through a towel like this, some cleaner on it, they usually get brighter and the towel gets quite dirty from doing this. So I usually pinch it really hard between two fingers here and kind of work the cord through. Also helps kind of straighten it if it's got any weird twists or kinks and whatnot. And then you can focus on specific areas like this. And yeah, this is something that the magic sponge usually works pretty well for. But yeah, another little fine detail that a lot of people probably overlook. So I figured I'd throw it in there. The case cleaned up decently. There seems to be quite a bit of paint loss. I have a feeling this thing was used in a window where it rained a fair few times, because all around the inside, kind of where the blades are, like it's splattered, there's paint loss and rust. Unfortunately, nothing too crazy, but the base especially, or the bottom of it especially, has some substantial paint loss, which is unfortunate, but you know, the thing's 50-something years old, so what can you do? But yeah, I don't know if you can tell already, but that is looking a lot cleaner, and this rag's a hell of a lot dirtier. Same goes for the plug, although you can't really slide it through your thing here. You can scrub the plug best you can. Again, the magic eraser thing works pretty good for these. This one luckily isn't too bad. But yeah, I find personally it's the small details like this that can kind of make or break, especially a restoration, but even just a simple clean and service like this. So why skimp out? Same way I'm going to go and redo the knobs up here a little bit better too at some point soon. But yeah, anyways, let's get back to it. looking good so far. We got a nice free spinning motor. What I'm going to do now, because it's getting late tonight, I'm going to let this run for several hours, if not overnight. We'll check on it a couple times. I'm going to grab the amp meter, actually, wherever it got off to. And we'll plug it into the amp meter, just make sure it's drawing the right amount of current. And if we're all set there, then I'm going to let this run for a couple hours. I have a temp gun. I'm going to keep an eye on the temperature of the motor. I don't expect to have issues because I ran this a decent amount the way it was, and the guy before me ran it a lot, but just to be safe. And then, yeah, we're going to let this run for several hours, let that oil that I put in the motor really soak in. It looks like it's already doing something, but you run them for several hours, they really get to soak in good there. And yeah, then tomorrow we can come back and figure out how to clean those grills. Alright, got the pressure washer running. It's a warm-ish day out, like 50-something. Go clean these grills up. So the workbench has been occupied with another project, so I'm going to finish this one up on the floor. But yeah, grills came out pretty decent. They're not perfect, but good enough. I've actually sold this to a collector already, so I'm sure that he can finish deep cleaning it if he really thinks it needs any more. Definitely a hell of a lot better than it was. So I'm just lining these up quick to figure out which slot the cord needs to go through, and we can get to screwing this all back together. I'm going to put one little dab of super glue on the front grill just to hold that one piece in place. And yeah, it's pretty much done at this point. I forget if I mentioned it in the last clip, but I ran this fan for several hours after completing the servicing, and it runs really good. Like, really good. This thing's got some of the freest bearings of any box fan that I think I've ever seen. At least of this vintage with a Macmillan motor in it like this. Because I'll show you here in a second, you just touch those blades and the thing just spins and spins and spins and spins for forever. So I think that doing the multiple like oilings, or like put the oil in it and let it soak in for a while and then add some more later, really helped a lot to really put a lot of oil back into those wicks. Because this is along the same lines as when I do those oil wick conversions to the 80s table fans. Just makes a huge difference. But yeah, pretty much pretty simple putting the grill back on. It's just the 8 screws. You can just zip them all back in, and then take a look at this front grill quick. But here, I'll show you. I did not push that very hard at all, and it just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning for forever. So probably one of the freest spinning motors I've seen in a long time. Blade's obviously got a heavy spot because it tips back like that, but that's typical, you know, 70s and 80s Lakewood and most other manufacturers really. Fans really started cheapening up by then, which is kind of a shame. I mean, it still leaps and bounds better than anything today, but compared to what I like to, it's definitely pretty cheap. I guess that's kind of a relative term. But yeah, we're just going to take a little bit of super glue here. Hopefully there's some left. And just put a dab along where this piece is broken off. If I can get any to come out of the tube. Here we go. Doesn't take much. Just putting a little bit up and around the crack. Don't need to go into the screw hole or anything. I'm going to put the cap back on this before I get stuck to something. And we're going to take this and just plop it right in there, which it looks like we're actually missing another tiny piece, which is unfortunate, but at least we can get this chunk back where it's supposed to be. And normally I'd let that sit for quite a while and cure up, but since it's the screw hole, I think we might as well just put the grill back on and let the screw hold it in place. So we're just going to be really careful with that.
when we do that. I'm going to lay this flat here again. In fact, might go ahead and do that one first. Just going to very carefully place that down there. Luckily for us, the super glue sets up pretty fast. Otherwise, these grills are in really good shape. It's just one or two little cracks like this. This is really the only chunk missing. I did notice after I cleaned them, they're a little yellowed, but so it goes. It is 50-something years old, if my memories and math are correct there. There we go, just put that screw on there. Real light for now, just to hold it in place. And go ahead and put the rest of these in. Actually, it looks like these need to be scooted down slightly. Just going to mess up our alignment on the bottom here, but oh well. One tip when you do box fan grills is to put the screws in and not fully tighten them up right off the bat. Just leave them loose. And then you can go around and get all the screws started and get it lined up. And then once they're all started and you know everything's lined up, then you can go around and tighten them all down. I did not do that, which is why you saw me just have to adjust everything there again. But it's just a little trick you can do if you want to save some time and effort. Alright, so it's all back together now, as you saw, and one hell of a lot cleaner. I am pretty shocked at how dirty that actually was. I knew it was bad, but it was it was a lot worse than I expected it to be. There's a lot of like really thick, greasy, caked on stuff on the blades in particular. But yeah, this thing's in really, really nice shape. Grills are damn near perfect. And now we've got a freshly serviced and varnished motor with some of the freest bearings I've seen. Just a little bit of surface rust and paint loss in the cabinet there, but it seems a lot of these Lakewoods have that. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and fire this thing up on high. Neat little multi-tone startup sound there. It's definitely a hell of a lot quieter and definitely moving a lot more air. Still not quite as much air as I would have expected, but I guess it's a good amount of airflow kind of out to the sides. Just not a hell of a lot of pressure behind the air. The thermostat works, as you can see. Go down the medium here. Seems to have a nice distinction between the speeds. Low is actually really nice. It's a real big difference there. That's actually very quiet. I like that. Nice gentle breeze too. Go ahead and flip it around here, show you the motor side. Burn right along. Yeah, as you can see, the grills are still a touch dirty, but honestly it doesn't bother me that much. The rest of it's nice and clean now. Yeah, let's go back up to high and we'll do a spin down. Get you guys out of the wind stream here. Well, actually not really, because there's still a lot of wind coming this way, but whatever. Here we go. "37-second spin down time." Really not bad for a pretty light plastic blade box fan like that. So folks, I'd say that's a pretty happy motor. But yeah, there you go.
This thing's now officially cleaned and serviced. And hopefully you guys learned something in this video, something was useful. Like I said, this applies to pretty much all fans from, I don't know, mid 60s and up or early 70s and up, especially box fans. Table fans are pretty much the same deal. Just the only difference there is to just clean out and lubricate the gearbox with some fresh grease and whatnot, but pretty much still the same. And yeah, hopefully, like I said, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this was useful or helpful. Coming soon is going to be a similar style video on an antique table fan, doing a 1922 GE AOU for those of you guys who want to learn more about the real old stuff and rewiring and whatnot, so you can stay tuned for that. But I figured we'd start off with something more simple here. And yeah, so let me know what you think of this type of video, if you guys want more videos like this, or it's just me kind of working through it, or a little bit more tutorial based. Let me know down below in the comments. But anyways, hope you enjoyed. If you did, hit the little like and subscribe buttons. I'd appreciate that. By all means, leave a comment if you have one, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.